is very questionable. And what I noticed is I'm using I just recently got a new laptop, and this is the first time I'm recording in the studio with this new laptop. And I realized I had a setting way off, and so while everything looked good and sounded good, anyway, there was a fluke that kept me from using the studio microphones, and instead it ended up using the internal microphone of the laptop. So instead of, and in the interest of time, instead of re-recording that entire 30-minute segment where I talk about Kick-Ass Torrents and a bunch of other stuff, it is here for you as is. Okay, so the opening of the show, you'll have to pardon the audio quality, but after that 30 minutes, the audio quality is completely up to snuff. But woo, did that suck. So my apologies for the first 30 minutes of this. But after that, and of course there will be the Star Wars Rogue One review at the end. All of that is in beautiful, melodious audio quality thanks to, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy's amazing studio. So anyway, apologies for that. Now, let's get to the show. Woo! Woo! The time is here, baby, because it is Sovryn Tech, the Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, is ready to get into action. And why waste much time? Because I got a hell of an episode lined up. First off, now this is going to be a little non-traditional. Of course, the past few weeks has been a little non-traditional. But we're not going to have any segments in this one. I've got 3 hot stories to talk about, and I can't wait to get into them. And then we are going to get into, and I promised it months ago, the second hour of Sovryn Tech is going to be a full breakdown and review of Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I caught it Thursday night, myself and the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. We both saw it. It was 7 p.m., and, right here in beautiful New Hampshire, and oh man, it is Ice Planet Zero here, baby. It's snowing. It is snowing. It was that Thursday. It was literally -3, I think, when we went to the theater. It was something else. And I was told that, I remember getting told this, boy, it was back in like 2005, back when episode 3 came out of Star Wars. People said to me, it'll be a cold day in hell when there's another great Star Wars movie, baby. And guess what? I guess they're fucking right, because it was a cold day. But was it a great movie? Well, that's the part that we're going to figure out towards, in the second half of this episode. So, but again, let's get into our main 3 stories. They're really, really something. Now, some of these I had done some hinting at on various Patreon episodes, which, by the way, if you're not a Sovryn Tech patron, what are you waiting for? All I'm asking for is $1 a month. If you want to do more, and a lot of people do, that's great. Thank you. But if you don't, if you just want to do the $1 a month, go for it. There are now, there's so much hours of content that is exclusive only to Sovryn Tech patrons. You want to be a part of this. And there's top 8s. There's specials where we're doing reviews of stuff. There's a Q&A, which you get access to ask questions. You can ask me anything you want. And a lot of them have been, honestly, they've been like philosophy questions, like anarchist philosophy questions, hedonism, all this. There's also, just tons of technical questions where I break stuff down. And people are really enjoying these episodes, and I cannot thank you enough. And you get, in case you didn't know, you will get, when you become a Sovryn Tech patron, you get a unique RSS feed, unique to you. And with that RSS feed, you can put that into your whatever podcast app you use. You can put that into it, and you'll get all of the the Patreon-only episodes. You can download them and listen to them at 2x or whatever you want to do in your favorite podcast app. It's so easy. You really, other than, just setting up Patreon initially, which takes seconds, you never have to look at the Patreon page again if you don't want to. Now, you can interact on there. There's whole community features, and I've had a lot of people, send in stories that way, and there's a messaging feature, which makes it easy to ask me questions and all that. Sure, you can use that, and you can listen to the episodes right on there, too, if you want. But if you really just want to, you can just get that custom RSS feed, and it'll only work for you. And away you go. So become a Sovryn Tech patron, please, if you've yet to. It definitely helps out the show. We've already got quite a few people, and we have various stretch goals that we're trying to reach through, or various reward levels, I guess you could say, that we're trying to reach through Patreon. So thank you to those that are already patrons. But anyway, if you haven't been, you miss out on like perhaps some of the nuance that comes up. And some of this has already been previewed to a degree, but I want to talk about these stories. These are one of them is very exciting. The other two are honestly, they're real downers. So we're going to need to talk Star Wars just to get back up. But one of them, I'm not going to do it. There's going to be no foreplay, because, we're going to go right to the orgasm right here. And this is exciting to me. I think it was either just yesterday or the day before. Let's see. So it was yesterday. It was the 16th. But here, I'll read the headline right from Torrent Freak here. Kick-ass torrents brought back to life by original staffers. Woo! Party! Can you beat this stuff, baby? The thing's like a New York cockroach. You can't kill it. It just keeps coming back every year, every time. And I just thought that this was so cool. Now, as exciting as it is that Kick-Ass Torrents is back, and I'm going to give you more on the story about what happened with Kick-Ass Torrents. I will say out of the gate that if you remember, because we talked about it, a couple months back, or when it was a few months back now, when it initially happened, Artem Volin, who is the alleged, site runner of Kick-Ass Torrents, he is still, now as far as I know, he has not been extradited to the U.S., which is what they're shooting for. He is still being held by Polish authorities. And as far as I understand it, he's actually in the hospital due to back issues, which, let's be clear here. Like, is that some kind of like a scheme to keep him from getting extradited because he has a medical issue and is being held in a medical facility? And understand he's like watched by cops and security and all that, in this hospital. Is that a possibility? Well, I'm just saying that's a theory that's out there. But regardless, let's talk about the story, and then I want to talk more about Artem Volin, but I just want you to know, that I am aware of that situation. Regardless, I mean, it's terrible no matter what, no matter the medical condition, no matter anything. I mean, this guy was just running a torrent site, and hell came down upon him, hell in the shape of the MPAA, which actually that's proven. Before we talk about the site coming back up, this was a story, interestingly, this was just announced a day before the site came back up. This is really important, I think, to bring up. And this is also from Torrent Freak, and that is the MPAA takes credit for the shutdown of Kick-Ass Torrents. So let's read a little bit about this. Earlier this year, of course, being 2016, Kick-Ass Torrents was taken down following a criminal investigation into the site's alleged operators. While the U.S. Department of Justice handles the case based on an FBI investigation, they were not the only ones involved. According to comments made by MPAA boss Chris Dodd, Hollywood played a crucial role as well. I'll read a little bit of the story here. This summer, the U.S. government shut down Kick-Ass Torrents, which was then the largest torrent site on the internet. The complaint was the result of an elaborate FBI investigation, pointing out that a Ukrainian Artem Volin as one of the alleged masterminds. However, it turns out it wasn't just the U.S. government who put the pieces together. There's another major force behind the shutdown that hasn't been mentioned thus far. MPAA boss Chris Dodd suggested. Of course, the MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America, these are the guys, this is the guild that, effectively handles, almost all movies, that you see, or pretty much all movies that you see in theaters, at least in the U.S. Chris Dodd suggests that the Hollywood group also played a key role in the case. Their international arm, the MPA, is headquartered in Europe, from where it actively helped the U.S. authorities to shut down Kick-Ass Torrents. Quote, "We have now established a global hub and office in Brussels. It has been tremendously successful in closing down Kick-Ass Torrents, the single largest pirate site in the world," end quote. Dodd told Variety in an interview. The major movie studios have helped in similar criminal cases before, so this doesn't come as a complete surprise. Generally speaking, however, the MPAA is not particularly open about the role it plays in federal investigations. Although the takedown of Kick-Ass Torrents was a major success for Hollywood, piracy remains a problem. It's even come to a point where Dodd himself is using the Hydra terminology, which the Pirate Bay's crew first brought up a decade ago. The MPAA says that successes are still being booked every day, but they require more sophisticated methods than were used in the past. Quote, "We make great inroads, but it is a problem that isn't going away. Some days I do feel it is hydra-headed, but in the past few years, we have developed a more sophisticated and efficient way of dealing with piracy issues." Well, I'll stop reading right there. All links are in the show notes for episode 204, but guess what, Chris Dodd? Woo! You didn't beat him. Kick-Ass Torrance is back, baby. Woo! What are you going to do now? Now, before we get into about Kick-Ass Torrance coming back, I just want to say this, like, so many of this shit, it's really so much that happens in the digital world, in the digital realm, much like torrenting and all this, like the arguments used against a lot of these advancements in technology and new ways to, shall we say, share content, or I mean, just for anything. It's not just about torrenting. It goes for all kinds of arguments. Okay, it's really old arguments dressed in new clothes. Like the arguments against torrenting. I implore you to look up cases of the MPAA against, guess what, the VCR. Right? I mean, when's the last time you even thought about a VCR? The VCR back in the 80s was, by many quotes of heads of the MPAA, was considered the greatest threat to, and they would lay it out as in, there's going to be crack babies on the streets if VCRs become a thing. There's going to be, it's just going to be madness. There's going to be Nazis everywhere. Well, I guess there's still those. But there's all this madness is going to happen if you unleash the VCR upon the world. And now they just took all those tired arguments, which, understand, the movie industry wasn't hurting because of VCRs, right? I mean, it really, really wasn't. And people were making copies of VCRs right and left. I mean, entire industries built up around the VCR. And again, the movie industry really didn't hurt for it. In fact, the movie industry was having some of its strongest years when VCR technology was really at its height. You think 87, 98, 92. I mean, there's a bunch of years that you can count off that were, just banner years for the movie industry. And it was at the height of technologies that allowed people to record a lot of this stuff. And so to say that torrents is somehow hurting them, we know that's not true. If Hollywood just releases a good movie, people will pay to go see it. So, these arguments and all this shit from Chris Dodd, it's bullshit across the board. Because one is that the movie industry really isn't hurting, and two, they're not beating anybody. Kick-Ass Torrance came back a day after this story came out. I think that's, there might have been some creative timing on that. I wouldn't be shocked. Okay, but everything's timing. But that's really important to bring up. So you get so sick of these arguments where people act like, these things are somehow new. Yes, there are, I think a lot of, well, it's not really new, because what I was going to say is that really, digital content, just stands in stark contrast and really slaps the face of the idea of intellectual property, showing how ridiculous it is. But let's be clear here. Intellectual property is ridiculous with or without digital content. Like that whole concept, that whole notion is pure madness and has been regularly disregarded by entire governments whenever they see fit. You think of, during World War I or even pre-World War I, Britain and America. Britain just completely disregarded IP law from America. They didn't care. They copied everything they could. Then there's plenty of other cases where that's true too. So I get tired of these old arguments in new clothes. Same thing with simulation theory, right? The idea that you live in a computer simulation, or that we all live in a computer simulation, and it's so ridiculous. This is just, it's an old theological argument. It's like trying to prove God, and they're just putting it into new clothes. It's nonsense. As soon as you dissect the argument, you realize what it is. It is just a bunch of people, really on another spiritual quest, when, look, folks, there's no spirituality. There's no supernaturality. There's no God. Okay? Be it a computer or otherwise. So anyway, I get tired of these old arguments, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about how the fact that, guess what, look who's back, baby, Kick-Ass Torrents. And admittedly, right now, as it stands, as far as I've seen, it is very difficult to get to the site, and it is probably under attack. It's under a DDoS attack at the moment. In fact, I think that's a fact. I just got a message from a Sovryn Tech listener, great guy, that it appears that Kick-Ass Torrents is under DDoS right now. Now, who do you imagine that DDoS is from? Could it be from this new global effort by the MPAA itself? Ooh. Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not like, why would Anonymous want to take down Kick-Ass Torrents? I mean, come on. Unless someone's going to make some kind of argument that, oh, it's back and it's a honeypot, blah, 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 which it's not, because as the story said that we're about to read here, it's actually being run by the original staffers who, well, let's read the story and then we'll talk more about it. A few months ago, a criminal investigation by the U.S. government brought down Kick-Ass Torrents, the largest torrent site at the time. As a result, millions of people were left without their favorite torrent site. This included a very active community of admins, moderators, and forum members. Shortly after the shutdown, several CAT crew members, CAT being Kick-Ass Torrents, regrouped in an effort to get the community part of the site back up. That's what I was just about to share with you. They launched and this is the URL, catcr.co. So catcr.co. forum as their new home and hinted that torrents could come back to in the future. So I'm going to stallion break it in here for a second. So yeah, very quickly, there were a lot of mirrors of Kick-Ass Torrents for one, and those worked. I mean, they started getting taken down, pretty quickly as well. But at catcr.co, there was like a community forum and all that stuff, kind of put together. And it was put together by people trusted in the community. Like people that you could pretty much verify were original staffers for Kick-Ass Torrents, for the original cat.cr, right? So catcr.co, has been a site that's been around for a while. It's not one that just came up. And now suddenly it's getting attacked once it reactivates torrent features. I mean, if it was anybody other than the MPAA, shut it off before it even restarted. Like it really doesn't make sense. So I'm inclined to believe that's who's engaged in this. But anyway, let's read on some here. Today is the big day as catcr.co or catcr has now launched a fully operational torrent site, which it's like talking about the Death Star. This is fully operational battle station, which looks identical to its predecessor. The site starts with a clean user database, but many members of the original staff are on board. The majority of our original staff, admins, and moderation team joined us after cat.cr went down, which is something we're very proud of. This shows the loyalty, dedication, and real love for Cat that we all, Kick-Ass Torrents, of course, that we all share. End quote. At the original CAT, site administrators and crew were clearly separated from those who technically and financially ran the place. This means that the people in charge of CatCR didn't have access to the original code and data. Still, they managed to put together bits and pieces to make it look identical, so former CAT users should feel right at home. And they have some screenshots on this link so you can see that it looks exactly, because admittedly, like for a brief second was I able to even see it that morning. Because afterwards, the site was constantly down and, you're getting waiting messages and all that. Reading on, perhaps just as importantly, many of the site's renowned uploaders are also back. As a result, the site will be populated with a lot of fresh content right from the start. Quote, we have all our major uploaders on board and they have continued to share tirelessly even before the torrent engines returned. The torrent community can continue to expect to see uploads from all the names they know and trust, end quote, the CatCR crew says. Now, Stallion breaking in again. I don't know if this will be true for Nemesis 43, who is kind of like the main person that I follow around as far as torrent sites go. Nemesis 43 is the person that uploads a lot of your comic books on Wednesdays in all this. And they have, I'll put this out there now, I was going to mention it later, but worldwidetorrents.eu, which is a site I've talked about. Originally, I mentioned it to Patreon Sovryn Tech patrons, and then I also, mentioned it to the Sovryn Tech audience abroad. So worldwidetorrents.eu looks like, as I understand it, was kind of started by Nemesis 43. And it's still out there. It's still happening. There's a lot of great stuff on it. It's certainly not at the level of say, like what Kick-Ass Torrents was originally, or even of a Pirate Bay. But if you're looking for, particularly, if you're looking for books or comic books, it's, in my opinion, it's still the best torrent site on the internet right now. I mean, it just, what it makes available is phenomenal. Not even so much audiobooks, literally like text-based stuff, which is a great thing to concentrate on because none of these require, massive gigs and, and all that like movies do, or, even a larger amount of megs, that discographies and albums would call for. So, to start off with that, because worldwidetorrents.eu is such a new site, makes a lot of sense. So anyway, that's a site to keep in mind when you're looking around on this sort of thing. But anyway, let's read on here more. Putting everything together took quite a bit of time, but the team wanted to make sure that everything is secure, which they are confident is the case now. In order to keep our members safe, we chose to rebuild and keep only safe elements. Despite the fact that a rebuild took longer, the safety of our community comes first, end quote, the Cat CR crew told us. Stallion breaking in, right fucking on. Yes, get this shit right instead of having a bunch of fancy features. Reading on, while some might see it as a bold move to relaunch a site whose alleged operators are still wanted by the U.S. government, that's the aforementioned Artem Volin we mentioned, the current staff sees no major legal issues ahead. They point out that the site has a proper DMCA takedown procedure, just like YouTube, adding that they don't store any copyrighted material on the site servers. Quote, CAT is a community-based forum and a torrent search engine. It's the heart of who we are, and that will never change. Despite opinions to the contrary, torrents are not illegal, and we do not host any content. So long as Kick-Ass Torrents continues to operate to the absolute letter of the law, then we are almost certainly not conducting criminal activities, end quote, they note. In a similar vein, the Cat CR crew believes that the original operators of the site will walk free. Stallion breaking in, that's good fucking news. Reading on, quote, we strongly believe the investigation carried out by Homeland Security and the IRS is unlawful in basis, targeting a foreign citizen and prosecuting them under U.S. law. We have every confidence in the outcome of the pending legal action, end quote, they say. Over the past months, many cat copies and mirrors emerged claiming to be the real reincarnation. In reality, the original site is still gone, but with many old staffers and uploaders on board, Cat CR might have some legs. And then there's a couple updates here. Some of these, actually, I didn't see until just now. Update. The site appears to have some technical issues as it went down after a short while. Another update, Cat CR's Mrs. Smith says that the overwhelming amount of traffic is causing the current issues. Quote, we've had a massive response from the torrent community. Unfortunately, the servers are having difficulty balancing the load of the absolutely huge amount of users online at the same time. Tech are on it and will no doubt have it sorted out as soon as possible. On the positive, this is an absolutely overwhelming response to our excellent article, so thank you very much to you and your team, end quote. And of course, they're referencing Torrent Freak. So as I understand it right now, it is confirmed that there is a DDoS attack. I mean, certainly there was the load of like a lot of new users jumping on board, and this is an incredibly new site, catcr.co. So that is great. I mean, that is great to have such a fantastic response and for people to be willing to take the risk and, to go forward saying, no, we will torrent, we will continue, we are going to support this. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I mean, as far as them having like a takedown notice now, some people are like, oh, now they're playing with the letter of the law. Well, Kick-Ass Torrents itself, in fact, I talked about it on Sovryn Tech. This is probably a year ago. When I started noticing that they were doing takedowns on, that the original Kick-Ass Torrents team, again, this is over a year ago and it was taken down this summer, they started complying with like DMCA takedown requests where they were saying, okay, yep, we'll take down this, and you really had to be quick. And a lot of people got to the point where they're refreshing the page multiple times a day because they knew that as soon as, say, like a really high quality a copy of a movie came up, that they would have to, they'd have to click that magnet link right away and get it downloaded, because otherwise, inside of, maybe minutes, they could be ordered to, through a DMCA request to, that Kick-Ass Torrents would take the torrent down, or at least the torrent link down, or the magnet link. So that's not really new. This was something that, and it really, obviously, I mean, up until, this summer, I think everybody could pretty much say it did not really affect, just the power and content of Kick-Ass Torrents. So I'm not sweating about that. Like, and I get why they want to play, the little legalese game. This is really exciting, and I just love the fact. I mean, it's not as epic as I remember a decade ago or so. Yeah, it was probably just about a decade ago because was it 07 or something like. No, couldn't have been 07. Maybe it was 08. Whatever. It was about a decade ago when there was that initial raid on Pirate Bay servers. And literal raid where they went in, a special forces team. Well, I think it was more like a SWAT team as far as things go, in Europe, went in there, police forces, and they tore down, they literally took the servers. I mean, they thrashed the place. And then within 24 hours, Pirate Bay servers were back up in Egypt, inside of 24 hours. And I just remember I was talking to a good friend of mine at the time, and we high-fived each other, yeah, fuck yeah, because that was just so cool, to be that unstoppable, And so even though this took a little while, I think that's okay, and obviously the community is very resourceful for a lot of this stuff. There are already lots of talks in the torrent community of how can we take advantage of technologies, say ZeroNet, which is something that people are already jumping on board with. How can they take advantage of a lot of these alternative I guess I'll say web infrastructures because they're not really alternative internet infrastructures where it's new hardline or anything. But that's happening. But until that sort of stuff comes up, I mean, building up the community and showing that, hey, everybody's in for the long haul and that the NPAA, the U.S. government, and every other goddamn government around the world can't win against us or, what the community as a whole. Good. That's a message that needs to get sent. That way, there's confidence and there's a willingness, to jump on with a lot of these new technologies. I think it's great. Just a very happy story. And I hope that the guys running Cat, the staffers at CatCR, I hope that they are absolutely right in the fact that Artem Volin is going to get set free, that, this isn't going to be an issue because no laws were effectively broken. It's going to be questionable as far as, how do they handle, because I think the easy case that gets made for people outside of the torrent community, why CatCR had to go down, is what they can say is, they get away from the argument of, is it okay, is it ethical to torrent, to share files, right? Because that's really all you're doing is just sharing files. They get away from that argument because they'll lose that argument as soon as you break it down. And they say, this person was making, millions and millions of dollars a year in ad revenue and donations and whatever else. And he was sharing our stuff, or they, right? So that's where they make it look like, okay, no, something really wrong is being done here. When even that, when you break that down, obviously there's nothing wrong. What? So they ran ads. So they put a Bitcoin address, in various links. So the fuck what, right? Are you going to really legislate against people being able to do that? Not that I want any kind of legislation. I'm an anarchist, but if you were really going to start, if the government was going to start going after people for having ads on their website, you've got a lot of fish to fry, and you're going to wreck entire economies. Forget about the motion picture. Forget about Hollywood. You're going to wreck the entire news industry if you tried and did that. So, anyway, I don't think they want to, they just as well, people kind of forget about Artem Volin and all this, but, that's another real advantage, I think. That's another, kind of side piece, another benefit of Kick-Ass Torrents coming back, is that it in a lot of people's minds, it reopens the case saying, hey, guess what, again, Artem Volin is alleged, but regardless, look, we've got people that are getting penalized, that are, behind bars or in the hospital under armed guard for, running this site, and it reminds everybody about this. So I think that's great. So best of luck to catcr.co. I hope technical issues get worked out, the DDoS attack gets solved, and whatever else is going on. Godspeed, as they say, around the world. But so just very exciting. I love it. I love these stories where, it's so plain that the government just cannot handle this. And all these, even authoritarians like the MPAA, shit, God damn it, we've been foiled again. It's so cool. Anytime I get to talk about that kind of stuff on Sovryn Tech, very exciting. So anyway, let's move on to another story that's really not so exciting, but nonetheless, I think very important.
And that's why, as you heard at the very beginning of this episode, you do not do a podcast on a laptop microphone. Oh, great Satan. My apologies. But there was just a lot of important content in there. Didn't want to have to, really didn't think doing another take would have helped. So let's get into the second story for this week. That happens. Shit. I can only think that this kind of issue has ever occurred. Before I get into the story. With Sovryn Tech, it's only occurred maybe 2-3 times out of 4 years, out of almost, actually all told, like 300 episodes. Not bad. Even though this is episode 204, really with all the specials and Patreon stuff I've done, it adds up to I think it's over 300 now. Well, there you have it. Anyway, all right, let us really get into another one of our stories this week, and then we've got one more we're going to get into, and then, it's on for some Star Wars Rogue One. And I know all you sweaties out there have been asking, have been dying. In fact, I've been saying, don't worry, I'm going to cover it. I saw the movie, I'm going to cover it. And actually, it's going to be a very unique one because I also listened to the audiobook. Days before it was supposed to come out. The audiobook wasn't supposed to be out till the 20th. Yeah, who's got you covered, baby? So no one else is going to talk about what I talked about, guaranteed. So you're going to want to stick around for that Rogue One review. Spoiler filled, too, by the way. So, you'll want to stop at the music. But actually, no, you know what? Before I get into our next story, I do want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, of course, that being agoristhosting.com, AGORIST hosting.com. If you're an activist, if you're a business, small business, individual, organization, whatever, whoever you are, frankly, whoever you are, if you want a web hosting, if you want to work with a web host that actually gives a shit about you, okay, and understands, the need for privacy, the need for security, the need for, hey, maybe there's some groups out there that don't have your best interest at heart, even though they claim otherwise. I want you to go to agoristhosting.com. They are your best friends on the internet. Believe me. Okay. They have great pricing. They really do. For the amount of customer service they give you, it's great pricing, okay? And they're going to give you that personal touch that you lose when you're dealing with some of these other companies that, some of the, perhaps the larger ones that, are maybe a little more automated. And this is a case where that is not a good thing. So you want to be dealing with agoristhosting.com. Also, and this is really slick, if you want to, say, start a business in a real free market like OpenBazaar, you want to be working with agoristhosting.com because they do OpenBazaar better effectively than OpenBazaar itself does. Now, what I mean by that is that they will do backups. They will help you set up your store. They will make the login process and the use process of OpenBazaar and all that as a business. They will make it easier than the raw software itself allows for. It is really, really something. I've checked it out. It is slick. You want to be on board with this. It's amazing what they offer. And of course, the beautiful thing is that they are absolutely a Bitcoin preferred business. Okay. And they there's no, and when I say Bitcoin preferred, they're not dealing with, third parties to help out with their payment gateway or anything. They are, and I know the guys over at Agorist Hosting, they have built Bitcoin into their business structure from the ground up, from their infrastructure to their business structure. It's all there. And so, this is who you want to be working with, especially if you're in the Bitcoin space, no doubt about it, or the crypto economy in general. So agoristhosting.com. They do automatic backups, bicontinental. Okay, they've got your hookup. You want to be dealing with them as far as a web host. I love them. So agoristhosting.com, and I cannot thank them enough for being a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. And if you do go with them, feel free to email me with how with your story, with how it got set up with them. I'd love to hear it. So anyway, agoristhosting.com, and thank you again for supporting Sovryn Tech. Okay. Now, talk about an online business that doesn't give a shit about your privacy. Well, at least at first it seems that there's been an update to the story that I will get into, but I want to first talk about what happened initially. And here's a story actually from Lifehacker. Evernote employees can read your notes and there's no way to opt out. Ooh, what's going on? Now, this story is from this past Wednesday. So that would have been, December 15th, 14th? I think it'd be the 14th. 2016, and let's read it here. Evernote just posted an update to its privacy policy that details how the company will make use of some new machine learning tools. In order for those tools to work, Evernote will need to allow a human review of your notes. And that's not the only reason an employee would look at your notes. In a recent update to its privacy policy set to go into effect on January 23rd, 2017, Evernote lays out how their machine learning technology will work, which most notably includes the fact that human review is quote, human review is simply unavoidable, end quote. The machine learning analyzes your notes, then provides a number of features, including improved search, learning how you use Evernote, then showing you data specific to how you use it, and even detecting if you're doing something like making a list, then suggesting different features. In order to make sure their technology is operating as it's supposed to, employees will need to look at the content of some notes. This does not mean all Evernote employees will have access to this data, but it does mean some will. Evernote allows you to opt out of machine learning technologies next to, quote, allow Evernote to use my data to improve my experience, end quote. But Twitter user Adrian Busk highlights the fact that opting out doesn't exactly get you anywhere in regards to the other reasons employees might look at your notes. Now, I want to stop there for a second. Stanley breaking in. So every time that not every time, a lot of times when you get that little checkbox, like say when you first install something, or if you're looking through perhaps the settings on an app or something like that, and it says allow such and such app to use my data to improve my experience, often enough, that is whatever the app or software is or service asking you, can we put an algorithm, machine learning, or even employees looking at, can we set that up to look at your data? That's what that means. Okay. Now, usually, initially when that sort of thing was asked for, it was just like, it was more or less asking, can we just send telemetry, like say crash data and some other things, which is now a separate checkbox. But that used to be, could we send this telemetry to the business, that way we know what happened, or, we can get an idea on how you're using something, or when something fails, like what is your, what is the makeup of your computer, make, model, all that good stuff. But now it's something far more. Now, as you can see with Evernote, it's all about, hey, can we scan every little single goddamn thing you do? And could we potentially have our employees look at it? Right. So let's see. What did Adrian Busk say on Twitter here? We have it. It says, this is a direct quote from the privacy policy that was going to be going in effect in January. Again, there is an update to this that we're going to get to that's important. While we think machine learning is a great tool that will help you get the most out of your Evernote experience, we understand, that being Evernote, that not everyone feels the same way. If you would prefer to opt out of machine learning technologies on your content, including some which require some human review for oversight purposes, you can do so in your account settings where it says, quote, allow Evernote to use my data to improve my experience, end quote. If you do opt out, however, you may not be able to get the most out of your Evernote experience. And please note that, and here's the important part, you cannot opt out of employees looking at your content. Right in the privacy policy. For other reasons stated in our privacy policy under this section, quote, does Evernote share my personal information or content, question mark, end quote. So there it is. You cannot opt out of employees looking at your content. Reading on. According to the privacy policy, Evernote employees can look at the content of your notes, and here's the list, if they believe you're violating a TOS, terms of service, for troubleshooting purposes, or to, quote, maintain and improve the service, end quote, if they deem it necessary to protect the rights, property, or personal safety of Evernote and its users, to comply with legal obligations like warrants, court orders, subpoenas, or other government requests. Now, of course, Stanley breaking in, that last one doesn't, no shock, right, that they'll look at it if they have to comply with a warrant of some kind. Of course, I don't think anybody's surprised by that. But let's read on here. If you're worried about the content of your notes falling under the eyes of an employee or through a government request, you can always encrypt them so even employees can't read them. But it's still an off-putting practice for some people. And there's a link in the show notes for how to do that. I also put a link in the show notes for how to get, like, what are the alternatives to Evernote, the good alternatives. I mean, of course, OneNote comes up along with some, and like Apple Note, along with some others. OneNote is actually fully featured and really can match, and in some ways even best Evernote feature for feature. But you know, there's alternatives and how you can like actually transfer it all, say, to an alternative and all that. So I put that in there for you because we believe in solutions on Sovryn Tech. But reading on, thankfully, it's pretty easy to pick up and leave Evernote if you're not a fan of the new privacy policy. That policy is worth a closer look if you're an Evernote user, so make sure you read it and decide how you feel about it. And anyway, so what happened was, interestingly, there have been two major updates that have come out of this. First off, there was this update, which was within like the same day, within the same 24 hours. Again, this was on Wednesday, the 14th of December, 2016. Evernote CEO Chris O'Neill responded to concerns with a blog post. Here are the bits that concern the machine learning issue directly. Quote, the number of employees who are authorized to view this content is extremely limited by our existing policies, and I am personally involved in defining them. Select Evernote employees may see random content to ensure the features are working properly, but they won't know who it belongs to. They'll only see the snippet they're checking. Not only that, but if a machine identifies any personal information, it will mask it from the employee. And then there's another update, and this actually takes us to a whole other story, which I also put into the show notes. And this one's actually from Android Police instead of Lifehacker. Now, before I get into that, as soon as I saw this story, I was like, okay, there's a very simple solution to all this. You know, I mean, the employee thing isn't really going to get solved so much. But as far as like, you know, the machine learning aspect of it and all that, here's the simple thing. Make it opt-in instead of opt-out. That is always, every single way that companies deal with this sort of shit. It should, you know, anytime a new feature comes out, it really should be, I mean, you can bring up a little notification bubble or something, okay, that says, hey, would you like to set up this? But, you know, really it should be opt-out or opt-in at all times. That means it should, by default, it should be opt-out. By default, the checkbox should be unchecked. It's a very simple solution to all this, and every fucking business with every fucking feature, you know, should have that set up that way. Unless it's a security feature, say like with a messaging software where it has, like, it's using XLOTL, or the Signal protocol, then that should be automatically on, because that is about how can we make things more secure, more secret. Yes, then you want to turn that on. Okay. But otherwise, anytime you get like new features like this, or, you know, you're adding in machine learning, or for fuck's sake, employees of the company are taking a look at it. Yeah, you should have to check a box to say whether or not you want that. Like, it should not be turned on automatically, because that's revealing user data instead of protecting it. And don't tell me in the long run that it's about protecting it. That's bullshit. That's the part. The part about the long run of making sure that everything's operating. That's the part that you can't even opt in or opt out of. That's the part that the CEO was talking about, where he said that, look, you know, these are the things that employees will always be looking at, even though they don't know who the employee is. Well, hopefully that's true. That's great if it's somehow anonymous. I understand that. Okay, even that could be problematic, but because, I mean, you know, putting pictures and whatever else into Evernote, but. Yeah, that's the part that's about security. The other part about machine learning, I mean, that's ridiculous, you know. So anyway, let's follow up the story here, and then there's certainly more to say. Evernote, here it is from Android Police. Evernote backtracks on new privacy policy, makes machine learning opt-in. Oh, look, they implemented the right feature, they implemented it correctly. Read a little bit here. In a not so shocking turn of events, and this was like, let's see, when was this story posted? This was December 15th. So this is just a day later, like later that night, or, you know, a day later at nighttime. In a not so shocking turn of events, Evernote has reversed its privacy policy stance that I wrote about earlier. The company is not going to implement it and will instead make machine learning and human review opt in, you know, the way it should have been from the get-go. The CEO, Chris O'Neill, attempted to offer some clarification earlier that day, which I found to be weak and ineffective. Evernote's policy stated that employees would be able to read user content, which the CEO then clarified to mean snippets. Well, that whole thing about specially trained engineers reviewing the accuracy of the algorithms with your notes is getting scrapped, sort of. This new policy will be opt-in instead of the non-negotiable it was before. This is what should have been done in the first place, Evernote, which, Stallion breaking in, exactly what I said. Reading on, O'Neill flat admitted that his company messed up big time with this one. Not to beat a dead horse here, but Evernote really did not think this through too well. His words were in the blog post, fit the situation perfectly. Quote, this is directly from the CEO, from Chris O'Neill. We announced a change to our privacy policy that made it seem like we didn't care about the privacy of our customers or their notes. This was not our intent, and our customers let us know that we messed up in no uncertain terms. We heard them, and we're taking immediate action to fix it. We are excited about what we can offer Evernote customers thanks to the use of machine learning, but here's the big part, but we must ask for permission, not assume we have it. We're sorry we disappointed our customers, and we are reviewing our entire privacy policy because of this. So we'll see what happens out of that. But right on. But we must ask, quote, but we must ask for permission, not assume we have it. How about that? A little consumer facing for once, because people open their goddamn mouths and say, whoa, Evernote, what the hell are you doing with my data? Good. Right on. But let's read a little bit more here. I like this statement much more than the one he posted earlier today, which we had just read. This one shows that he is taking responsibility and is trying to put everyone at ease. While I know some users made an exodus from the service, perhaps this might convince some to come back. The company has once again reiterated its dedication to its users' security. It is committed to 1, Evernote employees do not and will not read your notes without your express permission. 2, Evernote complies with the law in ways that keep the privacy of our customer data paramount. And 3, our, quote, 3 laws of data protection, end quote, remain intact. Your data is yours, it is protected, and it is portable. So that's it. We have seen Evernote make a stupid mistake, try to dismiss it, then do a total 180. Be sure to check out the blog post or updated help page for more information if you're so inclined. Now, a couple points I want to bring up about this, okay, before we get into another story. First is that, I mean, yes, it is refreshing to see that you really can, the market can speak. You can make a big enough stink to where the company's going to be like, holy shit, we're going to lose people. Probably what happened, and Evernote's already in enough financial trouble. Probably what happened is that they started seeing the mass exodus. And they're like, well, it doesn't matter what a few people are saying on Twitter, because you can't trust what people are saying on Twitter really anyway. Okay, it doesn't matter what they're saying there. What we are seeing the numbers that people are leaving in droves. People are downloading their data and they are running away, and they are doing so fast. Woo! And so they change things. Now, here's the thing, is that they're reviewing it. They said that they're aware that this is a problem and that they want to stand up for all of this. So we don't know exactly what the privacy policy is going to end up looking like. I still wouldn't blame you, and again, I put a link in the show notes for how to do this. I still wouldn't blame you for wanting to get all of your shit off of Evernote right now. Or doing the encryption trick, which there's a link in the show notes for that as well, is how to encrypt your data that you put onto Evernote. It's a little bit of a task, granted. And I'm not saying OneNote like that you should trust Microsoft more than you trust Evernote. Okay, I mean, other than the fact that Microsoft certainly has, I would envision a much better, shall we say, security culture or, security implementation than Evernote does, just by default for a lot of reasons. Okay, but I'm not saying to go trust OneNote or even Apple Note for that matter. Okay, but I would think both of them are just in a lot of ways, maybe a little more. Well, I wouldn't say trust isn't the right word, but you could perhaps rely a little more on them. Trust is not the word I would use. So anyway, I mean, yeah, again, very refreshing that the market can speak and that Evernote's like, holy crap. Now, of course, if you think that regardless of what they say in a certain privacy policy or whatever else, if you think that this still isn't going to go on, I have a bridge to sell you on Mars. I'm not going to say in China. Or is it land to sell you in China? However that old phrase goes. Because, I mean, of course they're still going to. And this does, I mean, the second, thing that was listed off by the CEO was that, we work within the confines of the law. Okay, well, it's a U.S.-based business. And so, as we know, due to the work of Casper Bowden, the late, great Casper Bowden, that any company based in the U.S., effectively has to, at any given moment, hand over any and all data on the company's servers, to law enforcement, to the government. So, this doesn't really solve anything, at the end of the day, as far as like that aspect goes. But I mean, I agree. Like, this is a whole other level of surveillance concerns, to not just surveillance, but like privacy concerns, to where, lots of people set up all kinds of things on Evernote. I mean, and really, here, consider this, okay? Not that I believe in IP. I hope I made that clear earlier, okay? Intellectual property. But you could be, say, writing a script or making this great novel or story or something, and some Evernote employee, ooh, look at this. And they, they could, quote unquote, take your idea. I use that term loosely, or that phrase loosely, and they could go make the movie. Maybe they know somebody on the inside that they could work with or something. Now, this is interesting because, and I think this sort of thing actually happens. Google Docs years ago, and this we are talking, almost 10 years ago. I guess maybe 5-6 years ago. Google Docs, laid out in their privacy policy that you cannot, if you use our services, any breach of your data that's on our services, you cannot sue Google for that. And they also said that we may use some of your, content that you put, onto our services like Google Docs or whatever else, for certain purposes within Google. And people properly freaked out back then, but Google didn't back down. And I think at the time, if Google made that change post NSA, I think, or, post Snowden, what a crazy term, then I think it would have been a very different reaction. But at the time, you would just get written off as a conspiracy theorist if you thought that Google was going to take a look at all your shit or perhaps use it for, something else. I mean, kind of very similar, even though, yes, I know Evernote isn't going to use your content like Instagram was saying they would, we're going to use your pictures for our advertisements or something. Still, I would be kind of concerned if you have like really, really important data. I mean, you shouldn't be using Evernote anyway, if it's like that, where you're very concerned about prying eyes, or at least it should be encrypted if you are using it. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad people made a stink. I'm glad people still seem to give a shit about the privacy. That's wonderful. Now, the second point that I want to bring up about this, and then I want to get into another quick story, and then we're going to get into Rogue One, baby. But the second point that I want to make is that I saw recently in some stories talking, blog posts and write-ups and, whatever editorials, whatever they add up to, talking about this concept of data minimization. And I thought, and I saw that, I was like, what the hell is data minimization? And I read about it, and I was like, oh, please let this be a thing. Please let this happen. And I think Evernote should take note, no pun intended, of of all of this. Because what data minimization is the argument, the concept that you really, that software companies, services companies, digital services companies, online, whatever, that apps that you want to really, what you need to do now, and this is like in TechCrunch and a bunch of other sites, news sites and whatever else, and people that have the pulse of the culture of Silicon Valley, that you want to collect as little data as needed from your users and customers and consumers. Why? Now, I mean, just straight up, you want to do that anyway, just out of, the basic human liberty of privacy. Okay. But outside of that, outside of respecting that, if a company needs to do it and you say, yes, you can use my stuff. Okay. Of course, that's fine. I'm not saying that. But outside of that, the reason being is that within, and this is such a huge subject really that I might break down further on in the future, is that within the legal framework that all of humanity lives under pretty much right now, that the data you collect about a user of your app or whatever can be, anything that happens to that data, you could potentially, you could be taken to a court. You could be taken to court. You could get sued, whatever else. You could have class action done against you because of your mismanagement of that data. So for all of these little startups and all these other people, you don't want to collect all of this data because it could be, if there's a leak, if there's a breach, or if somehow a user finds out that because of your collection of that data and it wasn't part of your terms of service or anything, that there would be some kind of problem. that something happened in their life, some tragedy or mishap, whatever, that they could take you to court and you could get, your whole company could get leveled in no time. This is and it's so true. And this is why I think it's interesting. This is why there was that legislation, what was it, this past May of 2016, where I think Google, Amazon, Facebook, a whole slew of companies, even though they said that they were against the legislation, what that legislation added up to, and we talked about it on Sovryn Tech, was that, a lot of these big companies were protected from this sort of thing happening, where if there is, some kind of, misuse or misconduct of data that a company collects, that they cannot get sued for it. So, but this is the thing. And obviously no shock that these companies get held up to that, because they know that your data is going to get misused or is going to get used by, say, various alphabet soup organizations like the FBI, CIA, NSA, AT&T, and other government organizations, because all of those, yes, are government organizations, including AT&T. So data minimization, this is something people need to think about, especially if I know a lot of listeners of Sovryn Tech are very much app builders and, are trying to do software startups and all that and services startups. Think about this, because you are not protected, by the NSA and whoever else, unlike Facebook. This, users' data that you think, oh, that's great, I'll just take that, can and will be used against you. Not that I like people getting into the legal system, but I'm not going to shed a tear if somebody sues some software company for, just even like accidentally giving out their address. If you didn't need the address in the first place, don't fucking collect it. So the whole Evernote thing, it's a small sigh of relief, It is nice that companies will react to consumer pressure, still. Even when we talk about how, there's so much legislation that protects a lot of these companies. I guess Evernote wasn't a part of that. But, just something to keep in mind that, yes, people will be looking at your data. It's a shame. Miss the days of good old client side. Speaking of user data, I'm going to get into our last bit here very quickly. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. And this is actually a story from TechCrunch, December 14th, 2016. Yahoo discloses hack of 1 billion accounts. We're all screwed. No. Effectively what happened here, I'm going to read on this quick and then we'll just talk about it briefly. Yahoo has suffered another hack. The company disclosed today that it has discovered a breach of more than 1 billion user accounts that occurred in August 2013. The breach is believed to be separate and distinct from the theft of data from 500 million accounts that Yahoo reported this past September, which is September 2016. That report of the 500 million accounts hacked, where all of these email users really needed to, change their passwords and all that, which frankly looks like, if you already did it then, you probably don't need to do it again. But at that time, they were just reporting 2 years later about something that happened in 2014. That was that original 500 million user hack. Now you have a billion user hack from 2013, which is crazy. Now, in the story, and I'll be quick with this because I want to get to the Rogue One review, okay? In the story, they talk about, with the Yahoo hack, or more particularly crack. Hack is a heroic act. Your crack is, a malicious one. With this Yahoo crack of 1 billion accounts, they say that, look, we don't think any kind of payment information was out there. We don't think anything important was out there, but everybody got a very long email explaining what happened with a lot of cover your ass language on it, cover Yahoo's ass. So maybe that's a new thing that's a new definition of CYA, cover Yahoo's ass. But as far as like what actually got out there, nobody exactly knows. Now, what happened here? Like what, with this 500 million user attack and the 1 billion person user attack, frankly, yeah, Yahoo's security wasn't exactly up to snuff. There weren't things that they implemented, but that perhaps they wanted to, which, understand, 3 years ago, Yahoo, under Marissa Mayer, was wanting to implement PGP into email. Now, we're starting to see, I think, why they were talking about doing that, because that would let them off of the hook of eventually these data, these security breaches, coming to light, but they never set that up. Now, why didn't they set this up? This is where, honestly, I feel bad for Yahoo. because we do know the story. We talked about it on Sovryn Tech back in 2013, where it was revealed that this is all, I mean, it wasn't exactly part of the Snowden revelations, but it was kind of part of that whole time frame, where we found out that Yahoo was getting fined $250,000 a day if it didn't hand over customer data, if it didn't hand over user data to the NSA, to the U.S. government. And they were standing their ground for a little while, but at $250,000 a day, yeah, you could be Apple, and eventually that's going to hurt you. That's going to hurt you in a few months, and not even. So I actually feel kind of bad for Yahoo, because at one point Yahoo took a stand, and I think that these, my personal theory, the Golden Stallion's personal theory, and I don't have a whole ton of evidence for this, I'm speculating, but I'm allowed to speculate, okay, is that both of these attacks, the 500 million user attack and the 1 billion user attack, were actually perpetrated by an alphabet soup organization. I mean, maybe not an American one. It could have even been GCHQ. That's my opinion, is that's exactly